Hello and welcome to my channel. So today I want to talk about some of the recent developments that are happening in the world of luxury fashion. And when I talk about the luxury fashion, I'm also including luxury space in social media under this umbrella. So there have been quite a few, let's say, negative developments happening here. And sometimes it almost seems like we're going to be facing a perfect storm, and we don't really know or understand what the results or what the exact manifestation of this storm might be. But increasingly, we have people asking this question of whether luxury is over and what's going to be next for this massive industry. And as I talk about some of these recent developments in the world of luxury fashion, I also want to offer some of my own analysis and maybe some of the kind of my own understanding of what are some of the root causes of all of these recent developments. Now, please remember everything that I say is for entertainment purposes only. I'm not a financial specialist. I'm not an economist. I'm simply somebody who has been consuming luxury fashion for over 15 years now, and I would like to share my thoughts and experience. And in addition, at the end, I would like to talk about why am I actually here in this space. I started this channel not too long ago, so it really begs the question, am I too late to this game? Is the discourse on luxury in social media actually coming to an end? And what's going to be coming next? By the way, if you're new here, please subscribe to my channel. This really means the world to me. And if you are a returning subscriber, thank you so much for being here and thank you so much for following me on this journey. So without further ado, let's go. All right, so under the first development that we see happening in the world of luxury fashion, I'm going to combine things like investigations, lawsuits, and allegations of poor quality and poor customer service when it comes to certain luxury brands. So maybe the most recent example here is actually the investigation that is happening with Dior for allegations of unfair or unethical labor practices in Dior workshops. In addition to this, it has become known that there is an allegation that, for example, the production of a Dior book tote actually costs only $57, but the bag itself, as we know, is retailing for well over 2,000 US dollars. So Dior is currently under investigation, and there has been a lot of discussion and a lot of discourse against unethical labor practices or alleged unethical labor practices, and also this extreme difference between production costs and actual retail price. The second example here is the lawsuit which was launched against Hermes in California. And this is over the entire notion of how exclusive the Birkin bags are. Basically, the lawsuit alleges that Birkin bags are being sold only to select customers, and customers are made to purchase other items they do not need, in order to be able to then allowed to buy something that they actually want, which is in this case a Birkin bag. The next kind of set of developments here are really around poor customer service. So if you look online, if you look at some Instagram or YouTube videos, you see a lot of people sharing their stories about poor customer service in major boutiques. Oftentimes it could be connected to how the person was dressed, how they looked, what they were wearing when they actually walked into the boutique. Then we also hear stories about unavailability of items, massive queues that people have to stand in before they can actually access the boutique floor. And last but not least, we also see a lot of conversations also on social media about poor quality of some of the items that we buy in these luxury boutiques. So, for example, especially when it comes to Chanel, I come across a lot of videos where people share their experience with just, crooked flaps on the bags, uneven stitches, and things of that nature. So, something that we definitely do not expect to see when we are paying so much money for some of these items. So, again, the first kind of set of negative developments for me falls under the category of lawsuits, investigations, and allegations of poor customer service and poor quality. Okay, the second set of negative developments revolves around a drop in revenue, but at the same time increasing luxury prices. So let's talk about Chanel, for example. A medium classic flap now costs $10,800. And I actually read somewhere that if Chanel continues to increase its prices at the same rate, in about 5 years, a medium classic flap is going to cost $20,000, which is a huge amount of money. And I'm going to put a graph here on the screen, but even about 6 years ago, a medium Chanel classic flap was actually costing you only about $5,000. So in about 6 years, the price of this bag actually doubled. And at the same time, going back to my first point, we continue to hear a lot of conversation about how many quality issues people are actually facing with some products, including Chanel products, including Chanel classic flaps. But in addition to just increasing luxury prices, and they increase everywhere, not just in Chanel, but pretty much across the board, there are many brands that do annual price increases. But in addition to this, we also see financial reports where some brands or conglomerates of brands, such as the Kering Group, for example, are actually reporting a drop in revenue. So, some of the recent developments are that in the first quarter of this year, 2024, the Kering Group, which is a conglomerate of quite a few famous luxury brands, including Gucci, Saint Laurent, and Bottega. So, the Kering Group actually reported a drop year to year drop in revenue of 11%, which is really quite substantial. And if we look at the breakdown of different brands that are responsible for this drop in revenue, it seems that Gucci, which is kind of the major brand that the Kering Group has, actually reported the greatest drop in revenue. And a lot of it is actually connected with lessened consumer interest in the Asian region. I have also recently spoken on this channel about the closure of an online luxury retailer, Matches Fashion. I will actually link the video up here for you. But also, when we look at e-luxury retailers, and I'm going to put a chart on the screen as well, something like Net-a-Porter, Farfetch, and Matches Fashion is also included in this chart, we can actually see that e-luxury retailers experienced somewhat of a boom during COVID when a lot of us were sitting at home and spending money online. But almost immediately after the end of COVID, or even in 2021, when kind of, COVID was still ongoing and some places were still experiencing lockdowns, but as early as 2021, major e-luxury retailers actually experienced a drop in revenue. And then over the next several years, they have recovered somewhat, but the recovery does really seem to be slow, and it's obviously different for different retailers. So, for example, if you look at this graph, Farfetch as of 2023 is somewhat climbing upwards, but it seems that Net-a-Porter, by comparison, actually kind of stalled when it comes to its further growth and further growth in revenue. So this is the second negative development that we have been observing in the world of luxury fashion, and it's really connected with some drop in revenue but simultaneous increase in the prices of luxury items. And the next development I want to talk about is specific to the world of social media, or specific to kind of the influencers and the social media space that covers the discourse on luxury. So it seems that at least several famous influencers have been selling their collections, talking about the fact that they no longer buy or collect luxury handbags, and just kind of moving on to something else, to different topics when it comes to their specific channels or their specific space in social media. I also seem to notice that there are more and more negative videos about luxury fashion on social media now. And a lot of influencers are once again talking about the fact that luxury fashion is over and what's going to come next. It also seems that we do not see as many videos anymore where people just show some of their collections, talk about how they use certain bags, what do they carry in their bags. But instead, we kind of seem to be talking about some of the negative elements that are connected to luxury fashion. And some of those negative elements are actually the ones that I mentioned earlier. So that's the investigations and the lawsuits and quality issues, drops in revenue, increases in prices, etc., etc. So the third development that I want to include here is basically this increasingly, I would call it, negative discourse about luxury in the social media space. All right, so now let me just share some of my own thoughts. What do I think about some of these recent developments, and where do I stand? What is my analysis? What I think are some of the root causes of what is happening right now. Well, first of all, what I actually think is that the picture is not as bleak as it is being painted. So in 2023, luxury market actually grew 13.4%. And the growth for 2024 is expected to be at 4%. Now, obviously, 4% is not huge, but it is still a steady growth. And I'm going to put a chart kind of on the screen here as well. But within the next 4 years, after 2024, annual growth of the luxury market is expected to be at around 3% each year. Once again, it is not as huge as the growth that we saw, for example, in 2023, but the projections really do remain positive. I mean, within this, obviously, some brands are going to experience issues. Some brands are going to experience a drop in revenue. Some groups or conglomerate groups of brands, such as the Kering Group, are going to experience, for example, as they are right now, a drop in revenue. But overall, luxury market will actually continue to grow. So overall, this is really quite positive, in a sense that that entire notion that luxury is over or luxury is dying is perhaps, I'm just saying this, is perhaps not really rooted in reality. Well, if the numbers are positive, then why do we actually see so many negative developments and so much negative discourse? Well, here I'm just going to say one thing. I mean, I think negative news sells, and negativity on social media also sells, right? Ultimately, social media is also a business, and people are competing for the number of clicks and the number of views. I mean, have you ever noticed how a lot of titles in different videos on social media, especially on YouTube, right, when we look at the titles, they're actually the same, right? And that's because if one creator creates a video with a certain title that actually gets the clicks and the likes and the views, there's going to be another creator who is going to notice this and try to replicate that success, at least to some extent. And it really does seem that negativity actually sells, that people are much more interested in seeing what's going wrong, what is bad, what is a bad experience at Hermes or a bad experience at Chanel, as opposed to watching a good experience. And this is for a number of different reasons. But I think back in the day, I remember when I was studying marketing, I heard a saying that if a customer has a positive experience with a business, they're going to tell three other people. But if the customer has a negative experience at a business, they're going to share with seven or 10 other people. I actually don't really remember what the number or the statistics actually was, but it really does seem that we are more likely to share something that is negative as opposed to something that is positive. And in the world of social media, when everything is so fast, is so digestible, nobody actually has the time to look into the numbers, look into the figures, analyze the stuff very closely. Something that is negative and quickly digestible actually has more views, more clicks, and therefore is more widespread and more reachable by the wider public. Therefore, it does seem sometimes that luxury is over, or luxury might be over, or there is a huge drop in revenue across the board, simply because those are the type of things that social media tends to pick up on. Now, what does all of this actually mean for me? Somebody who's just starting a luxury YouTube channel here in this social media space. Well, first of all, if I just look at the numbers, it doesn't seem that luxury is going anywhere. So the luxury market is here to stay. And I'm going to confess that I'm going to continue to participate in this luxury market. Now, I also think that as consumers, we are actually responsible to hold, let's say certain brands, certain businesses accountable. So it is for me important to look at the results, not the allegations as such, but maybe at the results of different investigations, lawsuits, and make my own conclusions, conclusions that are in line with my own understanding, my own kind of morals and ethical stance. What I would actually encourage us not to do is not to make any premature conclusions. Also realizing that how much of the negative discourse could actually be driven by competition and competitive interests. And with all of this being said, I really want to say a couple of words about what luxury actually means to me. So I first started buying luxury, as I often say, back in 2008. And my first interest was really ready to wear because, this is something that I just love the most out of all the different luxury items. So maybe ready to wear comes first, and then come the shoes, and then the handbags, and then a bit about luxury jewelry, like the fine jewelry and also costume jewelry. So I started buying designer ready to wear back in 2008 or something like this. And I kind of looked at a number of different brands, just the brands that I knew, for example, Dolce Gabbana and things of that nature. And then somehow just browsing on the internet, I actually stumbled across the work of Martin Margiela. So the design house right now is referred to Maison Margiela because Martin Margiela himself has actually left the design house back in 2008 or 2009, just at the time when I started being interested in all of those things. Anyway, when I saw the work of this design house, Maison Margiela, I really felt like I found something that was made for me. Those are the designs and the aesthetics that really spoke to me. Those are the type of things that I wanted to invest in, the things that I wanted to wear, because to me, they actually projected my personality to the rest of the world. And when I started buying designer luxury ready to wear, especially from Maison Margiela, I actually counted, and about 40% of my wardrobe is from that specific luxury brand. So when I started buying ready to wear, it almost felt to me like I was buying art. Different people buy different things. People might be buying art, as in paintings. Some people are into cars, and I was into designer ready to wear. And the reason I was willing to spend so much money on ready to wear, because to me, I was not buying just a simple pair of trousers or a simple t shirt, but I was buying a piece of art that I could actually wear and I could show to the rest of the world. So this was a way for me to express myself through everyday things. And all of a sudden, for me, everyday things like the trousers and the skirts and the t shirt, they were no longer just everyday things, but they were little representations of art, something that I could buy and admire, but also something that I could buy and use. Well, and ever since then, my luxury collection started to grow. I expanded into shoes and handbags and other design houses and other designers. But what I also like about luxury fashion is that all of us can have collections that are different, unique, and that are representative of our own personalities and our own styles. Honestly, I started watching luxury YouTube during COVID, somewhere in 2020. And that was because I actually lost my job and I had a bit more free time. So I just started watching more YouTube and I stumbled upon different luxury YouTube creators. And this is really when I kind of got maybe introduced to, let me say, some of the more mainstream things in luxury fashion. Something that I might not have necessarily noticed before because I felt like my collection was just so unique to me and me alone. But when I started watching YouTube, I started seeing people kind of buying bags that are similar, talking about the same type of designers and design houses. So that's the Hermes and Chanel and Dior and maybe Saint Laurent, etc., etc. So I got into some of that stuff as well. And I think what really luxury YouTube allowed me to do is to pick and choose, right? Once again, as I said, everyone's collection is still unique, is still different. And as I started seeing more and more items and choices that different people make, I then started making my own choices based on the information that I was receiving. And now, fast forward to 2024, I decided that my own understanding and my own collection has matured enough where I have the skills, the desire, and the interest to share some of these things with you. Oh, and obviously, a quick addition to this is, my channel is called Savvy Luxury with Lisa. So, as I was buying more and more luxury items, I also wanted to make sure that I could actually get the best deal for myself possible, right? Because, I don't like to waste my money on an item that I could pay full price for right now, but just a couple of months down the line, that item is going to go on sale. So I also want to use this space on YouTube, actually sharing some of that skill set with you guys and, talking about some of the ways in which I can get luxury items for a good price. And I hope you can then take some of that advice from me and do the same thing on your side as well. So I really would like to focus on kind of this savvy element of shopping for luxury strategically in such a way that these pieces last me for as long as possible, with me knowing that I did not pay as much as possible for these items. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching this chatty video from my side. Please give this a like if you enjoyed this conversation. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe. It does mean the world to me as I'm trying to grow this channel. I'm also going to leave another video up here where I talk about 5 best designer bags to buy on sale right now. But for now, thank you so much for being here. Take care and bye bye.